Hey, g'day folks, how you going? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, then a special g'day to you, and if you're a returning viewer, then thanks for coming back. Now, last week we had a look at Steamtown in Peterborough, and that's with trains and things like that. So if you missed that one, there'll be a link at the end of this video which will send you back to that video. Check that one out. This week we're actually going to have a look around the town of Peterborough. Now, the main street I found, well, interesting. I mean, you walk around and you have a look in the shop windows, and for a minute you could think you're back in the 1920s or something. And like so many other places around South Australia, the old buildings and the architecture are just, well, amazing. You really need to stop and get out and have a walk around and suck it all in, you know. Also, in last week's video of Steamtown, I said that there was a way of getting a feeling of what it was like to travel on early trains, and so I'll be showing you that in this week's video. I've got to say, this was pretty neat, I thought. Anyway, I'm going to start this week's video with a quick flashback to last week, which will give you just a quick explanation of how Peterborough came to be where it is. So grab a drink, grab a seat, make yourself comfortable, and let's get into it. Hey, g'day folks, how you going? Can you guess where we are? This episode we're going to check out Peterborough, South Australia. Okay, so the story of Peterborough and how it got there. Back in the 1800s, for whatever reason, Adelaide had three different types of train lines, three different sizes, whether it was passenger, whether it was cargo, where it was going at different lines. And they had a line that was running from the south, from Adelaide, going up into the farming areas to the north, and mining up like out to Flinders Ranges direction, sort of thing, you know. And over in Broken Hill in New South Wales, they discovered silver, and they're trying to work out how to get the silver from Broken Hill to a port. If they tried to go to a Sydney port, it'd be very expensive to put a railway line in, because they've got to get somehow through and over the Blue Mountains, and it worked out easier to send a railway line to Port Pirie. So all they had to do was put the line in, and it's relatively flat ground, so it was quite easy to do. Now, at some point, that railway line coming from Broken Hill to Port Pirie had to cross the north-south line going from Adelaide up to the north. So X marks the spot, and that's where a town was going to go in. Now, a fella that was quite involved with setting the town up, his name was Petersburg. The town was named after him, and I think the town was actually built on his property, so that's why it kind of got that name. Now, when the trains came in from wherever, because they were going on to different lines, the stock had to be, or whatever they were carting, had to be manhandled from one type of wagon onto another type of wagon because of the different wheel sizes. So, for argument's sake, if it comes in from Port Pirie, it then needed to be changed on a wagon to go to Broken Hill, or if it came from the south, changed to, well, that one was probably the same going through. But you get what I mean. The stuff had to be rotated from one wagon to another, and then later on, when the line to Western Australia was put in, that made things more difficult again, because passengers and people had to be shifted from one train to another. Now it made sense to put a workshop there in Peterborough because of all the different types of stock and trains and stuff coming through. It was a good spot to be able to put a workshop, and that's why the Steamtown workshops were put in there. Probably wasn't called Steamtown then, but it is now. So that's why that was put in there. And then later on, when World War I started, because of the anti-German sentiment and everything, they changed the name from Petersburg to Peterborough, and that's how it got its new name, and it's been known as that ever since. So that's basically the story of how and why Peterborough is where it is.
The year was 1881, and the arrival of the railway marked a turning point for the fledgling town. Steam locomotives chugged into the newly built station, bringing with them workers, goods, and a sense of promise. The town's strategic position as a junction where several rail lines met transformed it into a bustling hub of activity. In the early days, the population of Petersburg was a mix of railway workers, farmers, and tradespeople. The first homes were modest, built from local stone and timber. The town grew rapidly, and more substantial buildings began to appear, reflecting the community's growing prosperity. Despite the hard work and long hours, the residents of Petersburg knew how to enjoy themselves. Social events, dances, and sports matches were common, with much of the activity centered around the railway and local institutions. The main street bustled with shops, hotels, and businesses catering to the needs of the growing population. Peterborough's rich railway heritage is preserved through its historic buildings and the efforts of local historical groups. The Steamtown Heritage Rail Centre stands as a testament to the town's pivotal role in South Australia's railway history. Today, as you walk down the main street of Peterborough, you can still feel the echoes of its past. The historic buildings, the railway tracks, and the stories of those early days are woven into the fabric of the town. Peterborough remains a living monument to the determination, hard work, and community spirit of its early settlers.
As I think I mentioned in another video, travelling around South Australia has given me a newfound appreciation for old heritage buildings. I'm developing an interest in their stories. Maybe it's a sign I'm getting older. Walking around town, you can't help but wonder about all the things that have changed over the years as these buildings stood in its place. You think about the people who have passed through its doors and what their stories might have been. Take the Capitol Theatre for example. Imagine putting all your best fancy going out glad rags on to take in some form of entertainment before the working week starts again. You'd be back in the railyards or out in the paddocks soon enough, but for that evening you could escape and enjoy a bit of culture and community. The theatre, like so many other heritage buildings, has seen countless faces and heard countless stories, each one a piece of the rich tapestry of the town's history. The main street in Peterborough is lined with a mix of heritage buildings and modern establishments. offering a variety of goods and services to locals and passing travellers. Walking down this street, you can't help but feel a connection to the past, as if you're following in the footsteps of those from another era. The YMCA building has a display inside that you can go in and have a look at. The building was opened in 1927 and provided single rooms for single men. Over the years, it's had a few different uses and is now home to the Social History Museum. This miniature is of the first train station in town. It's a 1/12 scale model. Some of the material that was used to build this model was actually salvaged from the original building. Spread around are some of the displays of the tools that were used to create this tiny building. This is an old wool baler. They would throw the wool in, compact it, then do the bag up. A wagon, possibly from the train station. Upstairs is the work of the Peterborough Historic Group, who have got the 25 rooms back to the original condition. Each room has a collection of artefacts associated with the history of Peterborough. You know, people say that life was so much simpler back in the old days. Well, you know, I don't think that's really true. It certainly was different, but I don't know if it was any simpler. Life was tough, work was hard. You worked all day, including Saturdays. You came home late, you had dinner, then went to bed, ready for an early start the next day. And for many, they didn't know where their next meal was going to come from. Yeah, okay, I guess in the current climate, there are a lot of people today that don't know where their next meal is going to come from. But generally speaking, life is easier today than for people back then. We have better medical care, we live longer, although a lot of people live too fast, always in a hurry. And we have mountains of technology to make our lives easier. Back then, they were just excited by turning a light on from a switch on the wall. I guess what I'm trying to say is to appreciate what you have today as much as people appreciated that light switch 100 odd years ago. Places like this just help you to put things back into perspective. What's your opinion? Do you have any different ideas? Let us know in the comments below. I'm sure everyone's heard of Red Dog, who travelled to Peterborough in the 70s. Well, over here they had their own version. His name was Bob and he travelled in style. He went by train, by tram and by boat. He went interstate. He went everywhere. Now let's have a look at this experiencing train travel thing. In the centre of town is the Carriage Museum. This is a free thing to go into. The front bit has some historical displays with some stories of local town history. This is too much reading for me. Let's go to the back and get to the good stuff. Have a look at this. Let's take a train ride. Seat actually rocks too.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, not rocks, but there's vibrations on it. Pretty good. Gives you the feeling that the train's actually moving. Well, I did say sort of. If you're in town, check this place out. I've actually been to Peterborough a few times, pretty much just passing through. But way back in my early coach driving days, I did a few jobs where we brought kids over from Perth, going to, we went to Sydney and Canberra and then down to Sovereign Hills. And because the government have this thing about if kids, no matter where they live, they should be all able to have the right to go to places like, New Parliament House, Old Parliament House, War Memorial, National Museum, all that sort of stuff. And the further away you live, the more money the government will give you to go there, so that everyone's got the same equal chance to go and have a look at these things. And we brought kids over from Perth, and we would stop in here in the morning. It would be about 5 o'clock in the morning, still pitch black. Nothing's open, not that it mattered because the fog was usually that thick you couldn't see the shops on the other side of the street, let alone anything else. And we'd stop here where this train is, and this would be our breakfast stop. So for me it was nice to be able to actually stop and spend some time here and actually see what Peterborough had. Like most country towns, the War Memorial is always in the middle of town. We were here a few days after Anzac Day. Over there is the old train station. Let's go and have a look. Well, that doesn't look dodgy at all, right? The old train station just sits here now, empty and quiet. Wouldn't you love to get inside and see what's left?
The 1980s wasn't a good time for the station. With the rise of automobile travel and changes in freight transportation, the significance of railway hubs like Peterborough diminished. In 1986, the standard gauge line, which bypassed Peterborough, was completed, reducing the town's importance as a railway junction. Early 1990s, the famous Indian Pacific train, which connected Sydney to Perth, used to pass through Peterborough but was rerouted to bypass the town. By the mid-1990s, most regular passenger train services had ceased, marking the end of an era for Peterborough's once thriving railway community.
This is the old Peterborough train station. As you can see, no tracks, so it's pretty clear it's not used anymore. All the buildings are all been barricaded up and all that sort of thing, so nothing stops on this side. We do have a track over this side because this is the railway line that runs between Sydney and Perth. So all the freight that comes out of Sydney and Melbourne and all that sort of thing comes along this line. So does the Indian Pacific and the GAN as well. So that way down there, go to Sydney, and that way to Perth. So as you can tell, Peterborough is really big on trains. I did actually have in my head that they made trains here, built trains here, but they actually didn't. It was just a big like shunting area, and very big in the steam trains and everything, and they're still trying to keep that feel with all the train related stuff they have around town. The museum that they have up the road here, definitely worth going into and having a look. We went in that this morning. Yeah, not a bad place to stop. And I mean, I just did a walk around the streets in town there, and it's all the old buildings and the stuff in the windows still look like they're back from the 1920s or 30s or something, I just like the way they've kept that old feel sort of thing, So yeah, great little spot. Our last stop is a small private collection of motorbikes. The museum features an extensive collection of vintage motorbikes, ranging from early 20th century models to more recent classics. This collection includes well-preserved examples from famous brands such as Harley-Davidson, Indian, Triumph, BSA and Norton. There is even a small collection of anything vintage. We had quite a long chat with the owner about where he finds his collections, some of the stories about where he found them, and all sorts of other things. I'm not all that interested in bikes, but I found chatting with the fella more interesting than looking at the bikes. Not to say that there was anything wrong with the bikes. It just turned out that he had a really interesting life story, and he wasn't much older than I am. He's travelled all over the east coast, hunting for that elusive bargain, dug through mountains of garage sales and old sheds, ever on the chase. Although he says he's done with collecting, I'll ask the question, if you already have this much stuff, can you ever really stop? Well, that does bring us to an end to our little stay here in Peterborough. Worth coming into if you're in the area. Stop here for a little bit and especially check out that museum, that train museum. That's really worth going into. Anyway, if you like this video, then hit the thumbs up, and if you want to see more of this sort of thing, then hit the subscribe button. That's down the bottom down there. But that's it. So we're off from here tomorrow and we're heading to the Flinders Ranges. So until next time, happy travels.